Perfect. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. And thank you for joining us today for this first event of the AQMx webinar series, where we'll be discussing the new sectoral guidance that was launched by the CCAC last month, as well as hear about success stories from key partners. So my name is Juliette Laurent. I'm an air quality specialist at the Climate and Clean Air Coalition Secretariat, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. So we all know that transitioning to e-cooking can deliver instant benefits in terms of improving public health, mitigating climate change, slowing the rate of deforestation, and enhancing gender equality. But we also know that these transitions are incredibly complex and that they require a mix of energy planning, innovative finance, behavioral change, and community outreach. So today we'll do a deep dive on the new AQMx sectoral guidance on e-cooking, which provides practical and hands-on recommendations on how clean cooking transitions can be achieved. We'll also hear about inspiring success stories from our partners at the Global Electric Cooking Coalition and the World Bank. Just a note of housekeeping, we'll have some time for Q&A towards the end of the webinar, so please write your questions in the chat. And also note that a recording of this webinar will be made available on the CCAC website. So before we go into the detail of the AQMx sectoral guidance on e-cooking, I just want to give you a brief introduction to the AQMx platform. So AQMx, the Air Quality Management Exchange platform, is a global one-stop shop for knowledge and guidance on air quality management. It was launched by the CCAC on International Clean Air Day 2024, following the mandate of member states who called for the development of such a knowledge platform in the UNEA 610 resolution. So on AQMx, you'll find three components. The first one is a resource library with more than 1,400 trusted resources to support air quality managers. So you'll find anything from tools and models, databases, reports, and scientific publications. This AQMx library is being periodically updated as new knowledge products become available, and I encourage you to get in touch with the Secretariat if you would like to suggest additional resources. The second key component on AQMx is the air quality management guidance, which covers 8 different areas, from air quality monitoring to emissions inventories, health impact assessment, legal framework and policy design, and so on. And so this air quality management guidance is structured around 5 stages of engagement to support air quality managers on their clean air journey as they strengthen their capacity. On the platform, you'll see that stages 1, 2, and 3 are already available, and stages 4 and 5 will be launched on International Clean Air Day in September 2026. And the last component of AQMx, of course, is the sectoral guidance. So this was really a key ask from the AQMx user community, who highlighted the need for practical guidance on what sectoral mitigation policies could be implemented to reduce air pollution at the source. And at the CCAC, we really see the sectoral guidance as the implementation guide to the SLCP reduction measures that were identified in the CCAC integrated assessment. So as you may know, on the margins of the UN Environmental Assembly back in December, we launched 4 sectoral guidance packages for household energy, of course, but also for the agricultural sector, looking at alternatives to crop residue burning, the road transport sector, focusing on fuel quality improvement, and the waste management sector, on the elimination of open waste burning. And this process was led by the CCAC Secretariat, but I really want to acknowledge the contribution of the CCAC Sectoral Hubs members, who were actively involved in the review process, and so I want to thank them again for their valuable input. Last thing on my end is to tell you that additional sectoral guidance covering new areas and new policies will be developed over the course of 2026, so stay tuned for that. And now, so without further ado, it's my pleasure to give the floor to Forrest Robinet, who is the e-cooking expert who led the development of the AQMx sectoral guidance, and who will give us an in-depth presentation of the content and key recommendations. So Forrest, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Juliet, and thank you everyone for being here. As Juliet mentioned, I'm an independent consultant who supported CCAC in the drafting of this sectoral guidance, and I'm very, very excited to get to show it to you today. Juliet has also very kindly agreed to be our maestro and take us through the website itself so you can actually see the different aspects of the guidance and how to use it. So I just want to start off by saying during this part of the webinar, we're very much hoping for this to be a hands-on and applicable portion. I definitely will not aim to walk you through every word of the guidance. That would not be a good use of our time, certainly, and you can do that offline. But I hope to at least show you the structure of the guidance, the kind of resources and information you can access there by going through the web page itself. So here you can see the AQMx homepage. If you navigate to sectoral guidance, this is where the first of the 4 different sectoral guidance web pages are located. The second one is household energy, specifically focusing on expanding access to e-cooking. Thank you so much, Juliet. And so I'll just take this moment to say a little bit about what the e-cooking guidance is meant to do, and that is that it's meant to be a practical implementation, a practical implementation guide for policymakers, air quality managers, and any other relevant stakeholders who are working to expand e-cooking access. I think CCAC has an extremely compelling vision for AQMx, and that's for it to really be a one-stop shop for any stakeholders working in these different sectors, or of course, working to reduce short-lived climate pollutants more broadly. And I believe also that one of the most valuable adds of what the AQMx brings to the table is it brings together all of these different tools, all these different data sources and real world examples that are often scattered across different sites, and it has them in a one-stop shop that everyone can access easily. And even more than that, it organizes those different resources into a very simple step-by-step framework for any users who are seeking to expand e-cooking access in whatever context or whatever countries they're working in. So you can see we're right now here at the top of the page. I'll take this moment while we're at the table of contents to tell you a bit about how the guidance is structured. So first off, we have a very brief section on why take action on clean cooking. What is the case for prioritizing this kind of action? And this is a place where I imagine a lot of the people on the call, you'll see stats that are very familiar to you, but we wanted to make those well organized and accessible to you in case you might have any situations in which you're needing to make the case for prioritizing e-cooking and clean cooking. After that, we have what is really the heart and soul of the guidance, and that is the 10-step implementation framework. This is meant to be basically a how-to guide to roll out an e-cooking program from start to finish. It begins at the most basic level with baseline data collection and institutional coordination. It then moves through more intermediate steps like planning and policy integration. And then it finally culminates in the actual implementation of programs, enforcement, as well as monitoring and evaluation. In the case of the different 10 steps of this guidance, we definitely don't mean for this to be overly prescriptive and make users feel like they have to follow each step sequentially. Instead, we recognize that many countries are already going to be working on several of these steps in parallel simultaneously. What we hope instead is that the 10-step structure allows you to maybe see what's missing and then connect you directly to any tools or resources that will help you with whatever step that you might need support on in the e-cooking program that your government or your organization is working to roll out. After the 10 steps, we have 2 different sections. One is on financing e-cooking programs. That tells you about the different finance sources that users might be able to leverage or look at depending on what stage or what magnitude of e-cooking implementation they're seeking to achieve. We also have a section on the gender and socioeconomic equity considerations that everybody should always be keeping in mind when we think about how different groups are impacted by e-cooking programs. And then the guidance concludes with 5 concrete success stories. And these are really meant to showcase how in the real world, the different information contained in the 10 steps of the guidance are being executed by governments and organizations in successful ways. So with that, Juliet, if you'll take us down to the Why Take Action on E-Cooking section. This is the, as I mentioned, the first part of the guidance. Under the issue section, like I said, I imagine many of you all will be very familiar with these stats. You can probably recite them in your sleep, some of you, but for here we have what I hope is just a easily accessible collection of the most compelling data that you could present to, let's say, other members of your government, to interested stakeholders or donors about why e-cooking is a really worthwhile development priority to focus on. I will also say here that we don't just outline the stakes of inaction and the harms of lack of clean cooking access. Instead, we also bring attention to the tremendous opportunities for expanding e-cooking. Just one example is the fact that in many contexts, electricity access has expanded a lot faster than clean cooking access. And so you have households that are connected to the electricity grid, but they don't have clean cooking. They might still be using biomass. That represents an easy win and a lower lift to maybe bring those households into the clean cooking transition. Like I said, I won't stay on that too long since I know you all know it well. Instead, I'd have us move on to the first step of our 10-step framework, which is baseline assessment. I'll mention here that throughout these steps, as Juliet has kindly highlighted, each of these have an overview at the top that gives a high-level description of the content that you'll find in that step. All you have to do is click on that step and it will expand it to show you all of the content within it. Just thank you, Juliet, for showing that. And I will mostly for this presentation be focusing just on those high-level overviews as I walk you through the content of the guidance. There's a lot of text in here, there's a lot of detail, and I imagine it would be very easy for all of us to get overwhelmed quite quickly if we were trying to look at all the text in each of the sections. So for baseline assessment, I'll just first walk you through the purpose of this step. This helps users answer very practical questions, such as where will e-cooking deliver the greatest air quality, health, and climate benefits? Also, where will e-cooking expansion be the most successful and impactful? One, I think, very useful part of this aspect of the guidance is it invites users to go beyond some of the more common baseline data, such as primary stove and fuel statistics, and focus on other important metrics such as fuel stacking or suppressed demand. So there's guidance on all of that here. I'll also mention that for this baseline portion, it indicates how users can use detailed national data if they are available. As we know, that's that kind of context-rich data is the gold standard, national and local data. However, we know data is often incomplete. And so the guidance also mentions in this step how users can make use of global data sets or proxies in the case that national or local data are limited. So you'll find all of that there. And Juliet, if you'll scroll down to the supporting resources for this section, this is another aspect of what I think is tremendously valuable in terms of the AQMx sectoral guidance and the AQMx in general. For each of these different steps, you will find a list of what we believe are the most relevant and helpful supporting resources that pertain to the kind of work that we're recommending in the given step. So here you can see a few, such as the Cooking Energy Data Portal. You can also see the excellent SMAP report on quantifying the benefits of clean cooking interventions. And so all of those resources are linked to directly here at the bottom of each section, and you can go into them quite easily if you need more information or some concrete resources that help you do the work recommended in the given implementation step. And Julia, if you'll take us down to step 2, our second step is institutional arrangements, and this step recognizes the fact that e-cooking very often sits at the intersection of many different agencies and stakeholders, and also the clean cooking and e-cooking programs are always going to be the most successful when the right actors are coming together to work together. Often if there is siloing or if there's not effective communication between between those different stakeholders, that can really hamper rollout and progress on e-cooking. So a few aspects of this step that I want to highlight: it really tells you who needs to be at the table for e-cooking planning. It invites users to explore what mandates relevant to e-cooking already exist in the country or the context they're working in. It also identifies some different ways that you could think about what coordination mechanisms, such as a national e-cooking task force or a clean cooking task force, can serve as a very effective anchor for action throughout the country or the given context. We found just in our research and with the really valuable input of the CCAC Household Energy Hub members that often those coordinated national task forces can be really effective in ensuring e-cooking rollout. I'll also note that many countries also have these structures in place, and the guidance shows users how to not start from scratch, but instead coordinate among those structures and avoid duplication of efforts. Next up, I'll take us on to step 3, which is planning and design. And this is hopefully the point in an e-cooking program journey where you're taking all of that information from the initial steps, from steps 1 and step 2, and turning it into actual plans. So we think that the main value of this step is it gives you a framework for setting realistic measurable targets for e-cooking, and more importantly, that you align those targets with air quality, health, climate, and energy goals. And that makes sure that any e-cooking targets are in conjunction and they complement any other priorities of the government rather than working against them. And of course, that's going to mean that they have more resources and a higher chance of success. So some of those targets might be around reducing fine particulate matter in households. It might be around reducing black carbon emissions, or maybe prioritizing institutional kitchens, moving to cleaner forms of cooking, such as schools or hospitals. And once again, it's really helpful if these targets can build on different frameworks that are already in place, such as NDCs of a given country, or maybe any existing energy or clean cooking strategies that they have. Here is where I want to dive a little bit deeper into some of those great supporting resources that are at the bottom of each of those sections. So the first I want to point out is the very excellent World Bank SMAP and MEX tool, and that's the Clean Cooking Planning tool. And here, Juliet, thank you. We can show how users can click into these tools. If it's a link to an online website, maybe an online-based tool, you can hit that download button. It'll take you right to the URL for that. So here we see this link will take us directly into the Clean Cooking Planning tool hosted by the World Bank and SMAP and MEX. And for other supporting resources that are not online tools, but instead are PDFs that you can download, there's also that option. But I'll point out one more online-based tool that's a great resource for the planning and design step, and that's the WHO's Clean Household Energy Solutions Toolkit, abbreviated as CHEST. So same drill as the Clean Cooking Planning tool from SMAP and the World Bank. You can access it that way, and it'll take you directly to the CHEST webpage. And both of these are great. Just to tell, of course, there's especially one person on the call, our colleague from the World Bank, who could tell you much better than I can how to use the Clean Cooking Planning tool. But just to give you an idea of what it allows users to do, it helps them explore estimated sector cost and benefits of transitioning to improved cooking solutions. And as for CHEST, that, as I mentioned, is a tool from the WHO, and it's an entire toolkit that provides a bunch of different tools that countries can use to develop policy action plans for clean household energy programs. So those are just two examples of online tools that the AQMx guidance links directly to, and we hope that you'll find a bunch of similarly helpful tools, again, in the supporting resources for each section. Next up, we can head down to policy integration, which is step 4. This is a step where we really want to focus on ensuring that e-cooking is fully integrated into any other national and local planning. I think all of us know from the sector that even the best programs are not going to succeed if they're not embedded into policies and plans that already exist within the government. Those other plans could be plans related to energy, to air quality, to climate action. But again, you want to make sure that e-cooking is integrated in those and complements them. And this step 4 policy integration goes into great detail on that. Some of the things that users might want to think about ensuring that e-cooking is harmonized with are national frameworks such as electrification plans, NDCs, maybe short-lived climate pollutant action plans, and that makes sure that any clean cooking agenda addresses a broader government agenda, again, rather than working against it. Another aspect of this policy integration guidance that I think is very important is it talks about the value of making sure that there is one ministry or one body that is responsible for e-cooking action. That is often, in most contexts, an energy or an environment ministry, but it can be a different appropriate ministry given different context. Or it might be a national task force. But it's really important to know where the e-cooking mandate lives within a government. And again, the guidance shows you how to pursue that. Next up, we can move on to step number 5. This is standards and regulations. And Juliet, feel free to expand this section here, just so I can walk through a little bit of the actual content here. So this entire section focuses on the importance of trust and safety. For everyone working in e-cooking and everyone on this call, I think we know that e-cooking programs are not able to scale, and they are definitely not able to have sustained impact if appliances are not safe, if they're not efficient, and if they're not reliable. And so for this step, it really gives users a lot of information about how to look at the different elements of enforcing standards and regulations. So one of these, we'll see that the first one is adopting performance and safety standards. The second step you'll see there is establishing testing and certification system that might look like labeling, quality assurance, and consumer protection. And then the final step has to do with tariffs and grid regulations and ensuring that any of those government policies that are in place, that they support affordable and safe clean cooking. And I think the main takeaway from this section for me is to know that standards without testing and enforcement are never going to be successful. So those two really go hand in glove here. And that's why we wanted to emphasize that for this section. Next up, we can move on to communications and awareness raising, which is step 6. Here, this step is a recognition that behavior change is absolutely critical when it comes to e-cooking uptake and continued use. I think, again, just like knowing that appliances have to be safe and reliable, we know that actual adoption, it always depends on the communities that you're wanting to target, trusting the product and trusting the technology, their familiarity with the product, and then also especially the cultural fit of the product within the communities that you're trying to serve. One thing that we do here, as you can see on the screen, is we break it down into different communication strategies or products that can be used for different key groups. The first one is household and communities. The second is institutions and service providers. The third, policymakers in the private sector. And finally, media and the general public. Of course, all of these are going to have a different role to play in communications and awareness raising. So that's what we hope to provide here with that detail about what different types of comms products and awareness raising initiatives can be most successful in that. Here's another place where I want to highlight what I think is a really useful supporting resource. We have, for this section, 4 different supporting resources detailing really successful behavioral change campaigns and initiatives led by both governments and by NGOs, IGOs, and other organizations working on e-cooking, I should say enterprises as well. Juliet, if you'll take us into Tanzania's national communication strategy, that would be great. So here's an example, instead of an online tool, a supporting resource where it will link you directly to the PDF download. Here, this is just an example of Tanzania's clean cooking communication strategy. They did a fantastic job of really thinking out what that behavioral change campaign should look like. And so here's a great example if you're looking for some guidance on what countries have done that really worked and what really thoughtful planning of behavioral change looked like on the front end. Next, we can move on to step number 7, implementation. So for this section, this is where hopefully all of the plans that were made in those earlier steps move from theory to actual on-the-ground impact. And some things to point out here, we really emphasize that implementation starts with strong national coordination. That's where hopefully some of those earlier steps about policy integration will really come to bear and be beneficial later on. Also in this implementation section, we wanted to highlight, this was a really helpful bit of feedback that we received from our community of reviewers. often institutional kitchens and productive use enterprises can be tremendous early examples of e-cooking adoption. They're highly visible often. They can do demonstrations that build confidence within the community. And then often they have predictable electricity loads as well. So all of those can serve as really effective early success stories that then build momentum for e-cooking action. And so you'll see some detailed content about institutional kitchens and as well as productive use in here. I'll also mention here a fantastic resource from our partner MEX, speaking on that topic of institutional context. They came out with a really helpful handbook, which, thank you, Juliet. We can go into that and show them what that document looks like. It's titled Making the Switch, the Deployment Handbook for Institutional E-Cookers. I think you'll find in the case that you are working on institutional e-cooking in any context, this is a really detailed step-by-step process that incorporates a lot of really important aspects of implementation. You kind of soup to nuts, really everything that you need to know. It's organized in a very accessible way as well. So this is an example of some of the supporting resources that we have. And next, Juliet, we can move on to enforcement. So I'll speak very briefly on these past few steps just in the interest of time. For enforcement, this is unfortunately something that's often overlooked in the rollout of clean cooking programs, but it's essential for sustained impact. It's what makes sure that consumers are protected. It's what makes sure that consumers believe that markets are credible. And it's also what makes sure that clean cooking delivers sustained benefits over time. You can see here we break enforcement into 3 different parts. Preventative measures, these make sure that only certified, safe, and efficient appliances enter the market. Detective measures, these focus on different aspects such as market surveillance, retail inspections, and data systems. And these detective measures help flag problems early before they become bigger problems. And then finally, corrective measures, which ensure that there are clear consequences when violations happen. One thing to note here, another really helpful piece of feedback that we received from our review community is that when it comes to enforcement, institutional capacity, it goes hand in hand with that. It's key. So that means countries, in order to ensure effective enforcement, they have to invest in national labs, in customs officials, standards authorities, and technical training for local technicians so that they have the skills they need and the capacity that they need to enforce effectively. We can move down to capacity building. For this step here, this focuses on the people and institutions that are necessary to make sure that any positive change in cooking patterns are sustained and they deliver real benefits for the communities that you're seeking to target. There's a few things that we invite users to think about in this section. One is institutional capacity and mandates. The next is building the technical and operational skills for regulators, utilities, technicians, and financiers, any of the relevant actors there. And then finally, building domestic capacity and also facilitating South-to-South and peer-to-peer learning exchanges. Because of course, that's gonna be the kind of sustained learning and sharing of best practices that's gonna help countries and any institutions responsible for e-cooking have that sustained impact. And our final step, as I wrap up the 10 different steps of the implementation framework that we have here, is monitoring and evaluation. This should be an ongoing process. It's of course critical, as I'm sure everyone on this call knows, to making sure that e-cooking delivers real measurable outcomes and benefits on whatever outcomes you're most interested in, be those air quality, health, or social equity, or livelihoods. M&E tells us when things aren't working and also critically tells us when it's time to adjust course. So you'll see some information on that here in the monitoring evaluation section. I'll next glad to see an applause, a bit of applause for M&E, and hope you see the detail that you need in that section. I'll next move down and just briefly walk you through our finance as well as our gender and equity sections. You'll see that the finance section is broken up into 3 different categories. These are ways for different users of the AQMx sectoral guidance to think about what measures or actions are they seeking to take in e-cooking rollout or e-cooking program design, and what kind of financing resources should they look to in order to finance those based on how expensive they might be. The first is no cost and institutional measures. These might include integrating clean cooking into existing strategies or electrification programs. Sometimes these don't require new funding, so they can be a great place to start. Second, you'll see medium cost and operational measures. These are ones that are certainly not no cost, but they're not the most capital or cost intensive. Some of these might include utility-linked financing, support for demonstrations of certain e-cooking appliances, or maybe certain forms of results-based finance. And the third and final category, these are going to be the most ambitious e-cooking investments or programming. These might look like grid investments to the electricity grid in a certain context, or tariff reform, and that section includes all the detail about that. And now moving on to the gender and socioeconomic equity considerations. This is really the section where we want to make sure that certain groups are really not left behind in the planning and the implementation of e-cooking programming. This section invites you to think about several questions. One, who is most exposed to household air pollution and the impacts of the lack of clean cooking access? Second question, who controls decisions about cooking fuels and appliances? And then finally, who might be left out by a primarily market-based approach? So you'll see some different ways in which thinking about how both women and girls, and then also beyond the gender component, any kind of more vulnerable groups, be that informal communities, rural communities, last mile communities, who maybe by a purely market-based approach that is not prioritizing their equity could leave them out. And that's certainly something that I know that no one wants to do with an e-cooking program. And with that, I'll go to the very last portion of the guidance, and this will serve as the transition to the next part of our webinar here, which I'll kick it back to Juliet for. But I'll just mention here, you can see what I hope is a geographically diverse set of 5 success stories from Kenya, Nepal, Tanzania, Ecuador, and Burkina Faso. These are all examples of countries that have had really successful and very diverse types of e-cooking programs. So you'll see details about that, as well as supporting resources that take you to primary documents that you can learn more about what they did and what worked if you want to. And I'm thankful that our other speakers on the call are very well equipped to go into some of those examples. So I won't steal their thunder and instead turn it back to Juliet, and thank you all for your time and attention.
Thank you so much, Forrest, for this very clear and very thorough presentation, and really for all your work on the sectoral guidance so far. And as Forrest mentioned, now we'll move to the second section of this webinar, where we will hear about real-world success stories from key stakeholders in the e-cooking field, who will tell us about best practices, on-the-ground case studies, and also how the AQMx sectoral guidance can be applied to support replication and scale up. And so our next speaker is Alicia Butterfield, who is Global Manager for the Global Electric Cooking Coalition, or GECO. So Alicia, the floor is yours. I will share your slides now.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Hi everybody, wonderful to see you all. Thank you very much for this opportunity of talking to you today, and to Forrest in particular for that really comprehensive overview of this sectoral guidance. My name's Alicia Butterfield. I'm Global Manager for the Global Electric Cooking Coalition, GECO, which is based at Loughborough University. Next slide, please, Juliet. Thank you. So I think, as Forrest said, we've all got a very good grasp of the why in terms of the issue of clean cooking and the relevance that it has, and the need for that impact and the transition being necessary to move on to electric cooking where possible. So I won't go through the whole sectoral guidance, but I just had a quick recap slide there. But what I'm going to focus on today is specifically around the steps that we can take together. So that second point in terms of how it would look in terms of the baseline assessments, what those might be, what sort of components they might have within them. It's very important in terms of how to finance this change, and also how to make sure that it's GEDSI inclusive as well, and how to mainstream that gender equality, disability and social inclusion mandate. But I'm going to focus on the steps that we can take initially. So next slide, please. So to introduce GECO and to give you some of the background, it's a 36-member coalition, and it's comprised of large-scale organisations who've come together to try and kickstart the e-cooking movement. So Gecko was launched at COP28 around 2 years ago, just over 2 years ago, and we've had a secretariat function for 1.5 years. It's a very, very lean secretariat at Gecko. So there's myself, there's 2 other staff members, and we sit within the Modern Energy Services cooking team based at Loughborough University. So we report directly to Professor Ed Brown. So the idea is that we have a coalition of willing actors who want to see that change and that transition to e-cooking. And when we first started to have our discussions around the potential for electric cooking, we focused initially on the low-hanging fruit. So exactly as Forrest mentioned previously, those demographics who have access to electricity, but they're not using it for cooking purposes. They might use it for lighting, for charging mobile phone, maybe potentially for cooling, and for sort of AC and things like that, but they're not using it for cooking itself. But we swiftly started to move on from those demographics. So as you can see on the screen, we've got 3 different regions where we have this offset gap of that potential low-hanging fruit of people who could make that transition quite easily. But almost immediately, the discussion then shifted to also include people where we can consider new connections being available. We started to talk about cases like Kenya, where to avoid the expensive retrofitting, you don't want to have a system where you set up, create new connections, but you haven't factored in cooking as part of that. So we thought about the new connections. We decided to maybe include those as well. But then it transitioned again beyond that to also include off-grid contexts as well. So just as Forrest said, to also include off-grid, rural communities, informal community settings. So overall, within a space of a few hours, Gecko evolved from there's this very easy access segment through to let's enable the mass transition to e-cooking in at least 10 countries for at least 10% of the populations in those countries. Next slide, please. In terms of how this correlates to the AQMx sectoral guidance, we looked initially at the letters of intent from country governments and also from one state government to make sure that there's a clear mandate to show that those countries want to make that transition, that it aligns with their ambitions as well. So for the letters of intent, we have those typically from ministries of energy or ministries of environment, but with the full awareness of other relevant ministries from those governments as well. And they tend to be fairly fluid in terms of what we ask for as part of the letter of intent. It can either just be an expression of a willingness to transition to e-cooking, or in the case of Laos, they were very specific about what kind of targets they already wanted to meet within that letter. And basically it was their request to us, okay, how can you facilitate for us to make sure we meet this ambition? We looked at developing e-cooking readiness assessments, and these readiness assessments are based on the MEX Jigsaw methodology. They cover 7 key areas within the readiness assessment, and it's designed to be a snapshot of the country's position in terms of electric cooking. So it's not a preemptive roadmap or a national strategy precursor per se, but rather it's a snapshot to show what exactly are the existing barriers, where potentially are the opportunities, what might need to change in order to make e-cooking realistic within the next few years. And the 7 areas that the readiness assessments look at include the internationally transferred mitigation outcomes, or the ITMO, voluntary carbon market status, readiness of user demand, the electrical infrastructure, supply chain and distribution, and also the enabling environment. And the enabling environment covers a lot of different things, and it varies from country to country. We also looked at the country demonstrators. So in the case of Uganda and Tanzania, these are funded by the FCDO in the UK. For Sierra Leone, this is being undertaken in partnership with Forward 7. And these country demonstrators are large-scale pilot projects to try and kickstart that scale-up. So they will look at institutional cooking projects, mostly in schools so far, one was alluded to earlier, but also development of repair and maintenance systems, including the development of an app for repair and maintenance that's a little bit like Uber, but for electric appliances. So you can troubleshoot any problems that you're having with the appliance. If you need a technician, you can then request one via the app. That's something that's been developed as part of the Tanzania rollout. There's also standards and testing, awareness raising in the form of mobile demonstrations, and even radio jingles to sort of highlight the benefits of electric cooking, as well as supporting supply chain development through various different financing mechanisms as well. We also have the 5 national strategies which have been supported. So we've had for Kenya, Tanzania and Uganda and Laos, different interventions in terms of developing a national clean cooking strategy. For Sierra Leone, we actually utilised the ESMAP clean cooking planning tool to highlight what sort of additionality the transition to e-cooking might bring, and we're able to then add e-cooking into the Sierra Leone's national clean cooking strategy. We've also worked on NDC revisions in partnership with the NDC Partnership and UNDP. So I think the most notable success example of that is Nigeria, where Nigeria has since released their NDC 3.0, in which they specify an intent to have 55% of urban households cooking with electricity, which would mean that electricity is the primary cooking fuel in urban settings in Nigeria, which would be huge. It's an amazing ambition to have, and really great to see that shift in mindset happening. There's also the inclusion of e-cooking in integrated energy planning. I love the applause within audience engagement, that's great. To show, as part of SE for All's work, how that sort of planning and design can be factored into integrated energy planning rather than cooking sitting, as it often has done, as a completely separate silo. And then finally, for monitoring and evaluation, the 2 key ways which we've seen this so far is via things like the utility-enabled e-cooking, which is happening in East Africa, where national utilities are the ones who are monitoring uptake. They're offering on-bill financing for their users to purchase their appliances, and then they're monitoring electricity use based on that. But there's also the private sector engagement as well. So private sector will have their IoT-enabled devices, which of course they need to have accurate monitoring and measurement of the usage for carbon financing projects. So these are our headline successes, and I've given you in about 3 minutes sort of 18 months worth of work summarized. But I'm going to move it on to a sort of, rather than the headline success and high level discussions, onto something much more localized now. So next slide, please. Thank you. And introduce to you Caccione, which is an organization which has been around before 2019, but MEX first started working much more closely with Caccione in 2019, and they specialize in looking at off-grid solar e-cooking provision for rural Malawian households. There was some early funding for Caccione from MEX, which was followed up by later funding also from MEX, because the Caccione project started to really expand and has a lot of potential in lots of different contexts. It became quite a crucial example of success for us, because we realised that actually what Robert van Buskirk, who leads this project, can demonstrate is that it is a self-sustaining system. He's done the cost savings on it, and the lower the cost of the photovoltaic unit, the more accessible this type of unit system becomes. And what's really unique about Caccione is how much he takes into account the local context when putting together this system for cooking. It can be with or without battery system. The cheapest model would be cooking in daylight only, and has sort of an agricultural appliance as well. So it can be equipment for other uses too. It's not just cooking, it can also power lights. It could do some charging as well, maybe of mobile phone or similar. And the cost of the system is going down all the time. So I think what we started to engage more with Caccione, we saw greater potential beyond Malawi, but it started to form a really strong baseline pilot. Next slide, please. Thank you. And one of the main sort of draws of it was the financial impact for the end users. So bearing in mind that these are rural households typically operating around maybe just slightly above the poverty line, but not much above it. This type of saving per year can have a huge impact on those households. In terms of how this is assessed, I'll lead you to read for yourselves about this, and I'm happy to share these slides as well afterwards if you'd like some more nitty-gritty about it. But I think the end result demonstrates that sort of household level impact of this type of rollout and making it a success. The success then went beyond that. We had a demonstration of Caccioni's technology at our Climate Parliament event in Malawi at the start of last year. It wasn't intended to be a sales pitch, but he ended up receiving orders for units of about 40 of his different units. In total, at the moment, there's more than 2,000 units in circulation. Next slide, please. So I think it's useful just to sort of summarize what made it work so well, and then to link that back to this sectoral guidance from AQMx. So the baseline assessments, and Robert van Buskirk, knowing the local communities in which this operates so well, has been the thing that underpins that rollout. And as we know, the awareness raising and communication of these new technologies is really crucial to adoption. So, for example, understanding the farmers' financial models and how they operate, knowing that they, after harvest, tend to have an influx of cash, means that Robert then developed these units to be modular in nature, so people can then utilise the money from the harvest to buy additional components if they want to. The modules are sold via women's own shops, and they're demonstrated by women's groups. So it is that peer-to-peer demonstration, which again goes down much better. It's traditional food types being cooked. People can see that it works, and they can see that sort of functionality of the devices being rolled out. It does align with Malawi's renewable energy cooking roadmap, but at the same time, there are some gaps. So I think what I wanted to demonstrate is that at grassroots level, for these stakeholders, for somebody like Robert and his employees and the women's groups as well, they can also access the AQMx sectoral guidelines and make sure that they're including all the components that they need to make the project a success. It also highlights the gaps of things that they haven't done yet. So next slide, please. And this is the current gap that he has. So in terms of the next scaling up plan, it has to involve government engagement. And we know that cooking is on the map. We know that there is a national clean cooking strategy being developed. But I think what the guidance can help with is for Robert to utilise those tools to then make sure he's putting the right sort of information under the noses of the people in government and those connections that he has, to make sure that they're starting to see that there is already a working solution in these rural settings. So I think that can be a really crucial benefit to him. So thank you very much. I'm going to wind this up because I'm conscious about time, but I would just wanted to highlight to you that these sectoral guidance can be applied both at national level to those large scale ambitions, but also in a really key way to the local demonstrations of e-cooking success. And that way it can be used by a very broad cross-section of different stakeholders. And we know that behaviour change can be instigated from the top down, and that's why we've worked as GECO to engage with letters of intent and get the mandate from governments and work on national strategies and policies. But it also really requires that ground level adoption as well. So I think this is a really valuable resource for all stakeholders to use right across the board, and want to congratulate the team very much on putting out this platform as you have done. I think the next slide is my final thank you. So I will hand back over to you. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much, Alicia. Thank you for sharing this very inspiring story from Malawi. And it's also really great to hear how the AQMx sectoral guidance can support your work. So we're very happy to hear about that. And now we'll move to our next speaker. So Michelle Halak, a senior specialist for the ISMAP program at the World Bank. Michelle, please take the floor, and I think you can share your screen.
thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm very happy to be here and see all the work. And as mentioned, Alicia, I think it's became very helpful for the work you're doing. I just want to mention that yeah, I lead the Clean Cooking Fund. It's part of SMAP, and this is also part of Max. So we work a lot hand to hand with Alicia and the Max team. So you see there is a lot of convergence on the work you're doing. And I will start just to present what's the Clean Cooking Fund, that sometimes and how it's related. So the Clean Cooking Fund, this was established to steer bank operation toward clean cooking interventions and to foster the change in market conditions to accelerate adoption. So the idea is to be able to scale up. So as we see, there is some pilots, and we work a lot with our colleagues on Max on that and other partners. But our main goal, of course, is to support the market development. But our the strength of the World Bank and the Clean Cooking Fund is actually come from pilot and knowledge to help to scale up this operation, because we know the target and the needs are huge. And we use the experience of the World Bank, more than 20 years, to develop this project, these operations. Of course, as a World Bank, we're really focused on finance, but as part of this process, we also work on enabling conditions and other elements that are necessary to implement the intervention. This here, it's just a little bit a timeline when the Clean Cooking Fund was launched. It was 2019. We start to implement in 2020, and then we have several milestones. The first operation that's actually implemented in 2021, the results we start to get, the new business plan of SMAP that I mentioned a little bit afterward. And in 2025, it's very important to underline the Mission 300 compacts of the countries that have highlighted the importance of clean cooking Africa. The SMAP, it's a global fund, so we work with several regions around the world. So when you talk about the current business plan of SMAP, just to mention that we have the three things in mind: household intervention, but also improve income generation, and also institutions, which include schools and health facilities. Under this business plan, we are working hand to hand with electricity access, because we have everything under the same pillar, which is energy access. And this strengthens a lot our operations and the ability to work together on aligned electricity access and access to clean cooking, which facilitate, and we'll be discussing a little bit more about that, everything related with a cooking in this process of alignment. So just it's very a snapshot on the kind of things we do, like the structure of the Clean Cooking Fund. So the Clean Cooking Fund, it's able to offer different elements and to leverage different funds. So the Clean Cooking Fund, it's SMAP, so it's a trust fund, but we leverage IDA funds and also private sector fund to scale up. And for that, we work both in the case of technical assistance, different kind of a technical assistance, also debt financing for different stakeholders, including financial institutions or directly to firms, concessional terms, risk mitigation features and guarantees. And also we have been developing and work with result-based facilities, which include performance-based grants, digital MRV, geographical targeting, and so also community and social target. And the goal, as mentioned, it's always this idea of how we can scale up and develop market growth. And we also incorporate as much as possible the private sector. And recently, one of the innovations of Ascent, that's one of our regional projects in Africa, that it's energy access and include clean cooking. We have a Zafrid, which is an equity facility, which includes the World Bank Group and the Africa Development Bank. So that's just a snapshot about how we work. And when you look on clean cooking, just to make sure we are looking on, we tend to be as technological neutral as possible, but we look the different benefits. So we look on cost and benefits of these different technologies based on the different tiers, and all this information can be found at SMAP level. But just to have an idea, we look about efficiency, we look on ventilation, time, cost, and impact. And as you can see, this allows us to work with different technologies. But when you think on e-cooking on tier 5, it's a lot about the modern cooking stoves with the highest benefits. So every time that's possible, that's sustainable, we look for the highest benefit for the population target. And the cookie, it's an important solution that we have been working of. And there is an important part of this process that we believe that you include e-cooking. I just want to mention as well that when we work on clean cooking, and that's something that was mentioned before by the colleagues and also by the platform, we have a very focus on gender, and we look at different elements. Involvement of the woman during the value chain, leaders organization, the design, the testing, also how we design our finance and business model, distribution. Also, we look on instruments of empowerment of women on our operations, which include employment, creation of income, access to capital, and also we look on the outcomes of this empowerment, how it gain agents, how they gain confidence and autonomy. So just to have an idea, and we look at the whole process of the operations when we're working on clean cooking. So that was the main question about one case and one case of success. So I just choose to bring here the Uganda case. So the Uganda case, it's one of result-based finance that we have been supporting. So we have the support of ESMA, but it is a large World Bank operation inside of energy access. The implemented agents is the Uganda Energy Credit Capitalization Company. And the goal is to have a facility of investment for renewable energy sector, and it provides financial, technical, and other support for off-grid and clean cooking energy access and productive use of energy. And here you can see what kind of components we have there. So we have result-based finance, we have credit support facility, technical assistance, and also all the relationship with public institutions and policy development. And also it brings here the subsidy rate that we can give for each of these different technologies, which include electricity cooking device with 50% of subsidy on the RBF scheme, just as an example. And as a result of this, we have more than, at this point, the last report we got, we have more than 6,000 of electric pressure cookers, just an example of result. And also, it's important that we have support them, and they have the electricity regulatory agents introduced the e-cooking tariff, which was very important as an example about how to move forward and with lessons learned related with that. And it was introduced by 2021, end of 2021. It worked as a prepaid block tariff, and approximately about 42% of the household qualify for the discounts that they can get on those tariffs. The recent EPC pilot run, there has been a noticeable benefit on that. And especially one of the things we identified, it was in terms of faster cooking times and the switching of the traditional fuel. So we have saw many important results on that. And just an example and illustration of average and estimation, real householders reported 13.3 hours less cooking time per month if compared with other technologies, and mostly on women. So it's a very gender element. And also we see important substitution of fuels, of decreasing of the use of charcoal stoves from 57 hours a month to 18 hours a month when you talk about EPC. So that's it's a huge increase of efficiency and decrease of time. However, we have seen some challenge on that. We still see some awareness gap and awareness of the tariff, awareness of the technology, and we see still grounds for bigger development. And as the result-based finance goes and is successful in the country, we probably need need of a higher scale and a leverage of this RBF to keep going, because for us, one of the biggest challenges that's not good to interrupt when there is a project that has been successful and has been implemented. So that's just as an example. And to finalize, I just want to bring, and it was already raised by my colleagues here before, but some opportunities that it's important to consider, especially when you talk about scaling up. That's one of our focus. And one is opportunity. So we see a joint moment of electricity access and clean cooking. And this can be illustrated by the Mission 300 and the energy compacts that you see that the countries are including clean cooking as their goals. We also see the opportunity to have joint data collection and define appropriate target groups. And why I say that, I just want to call your attention a little bit for this graph on the left side of your screen. Why? Because when you see the expenditure of families on energy, we see that the lowest income groups, this is just an example of few countries, they spend most of their energy expenditure, most of the money that they expend in energy are in cooking. So when you think about energy transition and when we want to include these groups, if you don't include clean cooking, you're not taking the big bucket of it. And more than that, if you don't include clean cooking on that, you actually, most of the the expenditure of these people will still be used on fuels, on traditional cooking, which is not efficient. So there is a missed opportunity to actually channel these expenditures in cleaner and energy and get some scale and scope gains with electricity access. And for that, it's important to look on joint innovation. So this is just an example on the table in the right side of the screen, when you can see that there's different synergies that we can see. When you talk, especially here, it's just an example of synergy between off-grid and mini-grids and clean cooking. So you have business model synergies related with pay-as-you-go financing partner, the way we structure it and leverage consumer space payment insights, the credit story, the cross-selling of products. So that's potential synergy. And that's why it's very important when you are doing this project, don't do it one and then another one. You go directly with the package in the sense that the consumers can choose and can have the opportunity to use their expenditure on energy in general to include both solutions. Also, we have some synergies related with technologies, related with appliance, which include electric appliance, but also other clean cooking appliance like method LPG that can be offered also by off-grid companies. And then it's very clear the synergy that we can have on technologies like load management, time of use, and this kind of thing. And also in the operational approach, when we're structuring the operation, there is a lot of synergies because we can have the same finance facility. We can use the same result-based finance for affordability, the technical assistance, the data, we can use the same. So we may use, and there is an opportunity to decrease transaction costs using similar implementation arrangement for both sides. So that's some opportunities we see. but there is some elements to consider, and I'm really happy that you mentioned the planning tool and it's inside of the platform. So one of the key elements to consider is the planning. Often when you do electricity access planning, you don't include the clean cooking load. So it's very important when you access the business model, potential business model, the load and the infrastructure to check if it makes sense for that context, the inclusion of e-cooking, and for that, have a nice planning. It's very, very important. Cooking can be the largest energy consumption for some groups or some areas, so that's not a marginal effect. And if you're not considering the planning, you're not considering the initial investment decision, after it's very hard or it's very costly. We need almost to do things again to include in cooking. So the timing of this is very important. The other thing on behavior change, I just want to highlight the stacking. It's very important. Sometimes when I'm discussing with people and the people say, but you want to change our culture. I think the adaptation, it's very important, the behavior change, and nobody wants to change weekend barbecues. I'm come from Brazil, and I'm not trying to convince anybody that they need to go necessarily to change their weekend barbecues. It's mostly how they change and how they combine and how they actually include this healthy mechanism in their daily life instead to change big cultural events, parties, or things like that. So thinking about stacking, and how you work on this behavior, it's very important. Regulation, it's another key element, especially when you talk about electricity, because of the regulation of electricity tariff design. Often we see that social tariff or a baseline tariff, they have a cap, and this cap cannot include e-cooking. So the regulation is one of the barriers of adoption. So we need to rethink efficient, effective tariffs that allow that. When you have some subsidies, we need to be able to have at least technological neutral subsidy, in the sense that to be more effective and allow different technologies. That was already mentioned, the standards as very important. And also, as electricity allow us to have a better measurement of the usually often there is a higher measurement of the use of the cook, the relationship and the regulation with carbon markets framework is very important for revenue enhancement in many projects. And also we need to think the business model and finance structure. And I would suggest that can be very different, the business model on grid connection. And when you talk about distributed energy, renewable energy, the DRE, the business model, the finance structure may be very different. And I think there is a lot of potential to have the role of utilities. We start to see that, but there is a lot of potential to go further. And we need to think more about how we can include, because part of the access you'll be on grid, part will be off grid, and clean cook can play a role, and e-cooking can play a role on these different business models and different finance structure. So that's some of the elements for us. I believe that the platform and the elements that were raised aligned a lot with this. And as you see, I think it's important for us to take in account everything we know and move forward. There is a big opportunity, and there is new things that we need to understand and learn and propose and innovate to move forward. So I guess that's for today. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you so much, Michelle, for really this great overview of all the clean cooking initiatives being supported by the World Bank. I think it was especially interesting to hear your insights on what innovative business models can really leverage those transitions to e-cooking. And I also want to remind all participants today that initiatives like ISMAP, MEX, Gecko really produce a range of amazing knowledge products, decision support tools that can really support clean cooking transitions. And many of them are available on the AQMx library, so I really encourage you to have a look. And now, so it's my pleasure to welcome our last speaker for today, my colleague Sandra Cavalieri, who is the Hubs Manager at the CCAC Secretariat, and will tell us about a new exciting program launched by the CCAC. Sandra, please go ahead.
Well, hello everyone, and thank you so much to all of the speakers. I've never seen so much virtual applause, so I feel this was really a standing ovation webinar. And so thank you so much to you, Juliet, and Forrest, and Alicia, and Michelle. It's just been really an inspiring hour. I will say that the CCAC, the program that Juliet is referring to, we have right now recently closed call for proposals for the CCAC Challenge program on accelerating the uptake of e-cooking in Africa. This call for proposals closed on December 12th, and we are currently evaluating proposals. There's a total of about $2 million that will be allocated to the winning project or projects, and we're really inspired by the number. We have hundreds of proposals that we're reading, and we're seeing a lot of innovative ideas all across the African continent. For those who aren't familiar with this challenge call, I'll just briefly say that the challenge was to incorporate a number of different focus areas. So looking at locally appropriate e-cooking technologies, looking at energy access planning and infrastructure integration, looking at financial inclusion and affordability models, and last but not least, looking at women's empowerment and behavior change. And so really exciting to hear the examples provided here today and to think of it in this context. I want to say that for countries on the line who are interested in e-cooking support, the CCAC does have what's called a technical expert assistance program, and so governments can request support from the CCAC. And so if you see pieces of the AQMx e-cooking guidance where you notice gaps in your own programming and you think that the CCAC could help you fill those gaps, those are requests that we would be really welcome to receive. I also want to draw your attention to the fact that the CCAC has a new program called TEEP, Technology and Economic Assessment Panel, where we're looking at solutions that are currently underfinanced, but have really excellent potential to scale. So really thinking about this question of how we can scale up solutions that work, like what we saw in the example that Alicia shared from Malawi, is a really exciting idea of like how you can take something that's working in Malawi and think about how you could scale it beyond Malawi. So I think last thing I just want to say is the AQMx has been a long time kind of planning and development, and to see this type of guidance that Forrest has created is really just unbelievable, in my opinion, to see that it actually, I believe, worked. And so our next really step is to engage with the countries in the GECO, to work with the GECO Secretariat, to really develop a user community so that, and with all of the World Bank projects, with all of this big innovation through Mission 300 and through all of this opportunity we have right now, is to really bring people together and see it working and have it work. So if you are on the line and you would be interested in like kind of brainstorming more about that, like please let us know. I think that the Household Energy Hub is a place where we can really think about how we can take this and expand it to users like Robert, and find all of the Roberts around the world who are like working so diligently and are so ahead of the game, and bringing all of those people together who are really the leaders in their communities, so we can inspire more people to follow them. So thank you so much. I don't want to take up any more time and really look forward to the Q&A. And also just anyone who would like to reach out to us, you can always use the Secretariat email account that's on the CCAC website, and we'll pop it in the chat. And we look forward to connecting with you. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Sandra, for your words. So yes, as mentioned by Sandra, we have some time allocated for Q&A. I don't see any question in the chat, but please do come forward with any question to speakers that you may have. And also pointing out that you'll find in the chat a poll asking for your suggestions and priority in terms of what new additional guidance for the household energy should the AQMx and CCAC team work on next. So we're really eager to gauge your interest and priorities in terms of new areas for sectoral guidance. So please do enter that poll and do come forward with any question you may have. You can write them in the chat or just raise your hand and take the floor. And maybe while participants are thinking about their own questions, maybe I can ask a question to Forrest for a start. If you could tell us a bit more about how, in your opinion, this AQMx sectoral guidance could help e-cooking program designers and implementers, making sure that they are avoiding any duplication of effort in the rollout of e-cooking programs.
I'd be happy to, Juliet, and I see we have a hand raised in the chat. If we can move to that question, I'll keep my answer brief. I think I'm so appreciative to the CCAC for how intuitively I believe you all created this implementation framework for these 10 steps. I think the fantastic aspect of the earlier stages being all about mapping and understanding what the landscape is, that are those policy integration and planning and design sections are the ones that really allow any users of AQMx and all of those practitioners who are rolling out and planning e-cooking programming in their countries, by following those steps and the information we have there, getting that lay of the land is what's going to allow them to prevent any duplication of efforts and also ensure they're going to gain common momentum by linking whatever e-cooking plans they have to whatever other initiatives or priorities the government in their context has. And I'll leave it at that and allow you, Juliet, to take some of the questions we have.
Thank you, Forrest. Swati, I think that you have your hand up. Please take the floor.
Yeah, so I am from India. I work with a state pollution control body, a regulatory body in India. And the presentations were very fascinating, especially solution driven in terms of e-cooking, because India also runs a midday meal scheme. And a lot of it is dependent on fire cooking. So I just want to know if there's a cost analysis done with respect to Indian landscape, the costing and everything. And yeah, happy to collaborate if anyone has any interest to start an initiative in a state in India.
Thank you so much, Swati. Michelle, do you want to address the question?
Yeah, I just want to jump in. I think I would suggest the planning tool we have in India, so we can take a look. It's a general data, and it's very complex, but it's something that we can start with. And I also want to mention that the banks work on clean air operation in some state in India. One of them is Uttar Pradesh. So if you can get in touch, we can just chat and see yeah, how our colleagues are working there. But India, it's one of the countries that we have working with.
All right, yeah, if you can leave your email ID or something, I can facilitate collaboration with Punjab. That's another state.
Alicia, did you want to address that question as well?
Yeah, I was actually going to ask which state it was. So yes, it was related to that question. And to say that we've had, as Gecko, we were connected with Kerala State. It's the only state level letter of intent that we have. And we're conducting our readiness assessment for electric cooking for that state. And that will be due by the end of January. So there'll be a sort of public release document up on the website, probably by mid-February. If that gives you an idea of what kind of readiness assessments we've undertaken so far. And yes, we potentially look at other states as well. Would be good to connect to. So I'll put my email address into the chat too.
Thank
Great.
you.
Ben, I see you have your hand up. Please take the floor.
All right, thank you. Permit me to appreciate every presenter. It was a wonderful presentation. It was really an eye-opening. However, my concern when it comes to e-cooking in Africa is the electricity challenge. Because so many households do not have access to electricity, let alone considering e-cooking. Even myself, I've stayed in Nigeria, and I know that most of the times what we use is the gas because it's cheaper. So I was a bit shocked when one of the presenters talked about the data from Nigeria hoping to switch to e-cooking, especially in urban centers, because the lights are not even there, the bills are high, and the economic situation is also terrible. So that's the challenge I'm looking at, how we are going to actually implement that in Africa, because unlike developed countries where you have a stable framework that actually makes electricity accessible to all, in Africa, people try to manage the electricity. In fact, currently, what we're trying to do, we're trying to switch people to solar panels so that they can actually have more access to electricity. So the only thing we might be looking at for e-cooking is if we can develop energy efficient e-cooking devices that will not consume as much as the conventional resistance eating plates that we have. So that's just my little concern about the Africa project. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben, for that question. Alicia, did you want to address it?
Yes, yeah, sure. Mainly, Ben, because my background was in Nigeria before joining the MEX team. So it's a country that's very sort of close to my heart in terms of our engagement there. And yeah, we've worked a lot in Nigeria in terms of that connection. But I think it was in Sierra Leone when somebody raised a very direct question, as is the way, when they said to me, "Why are you here talking about electric cooking when we don't have the E?" And yet you're here trying to persuade us. And the whole point of certainly for Gecko is that we're not trying to persuade. It's more a case of removing potential barriers. So yes, grid reliability is one of the potential barriers, but some of our members like AVSI have been doing things like modeling of the stress testing of the impact of electric cooking on the grid to see what changes need to be made to enable that to happen. We're also conscious as well, like Michelle mentioned earlier, about Mission 300, and where there are those new connections being formed, we don't want electric cooking to be an afterthought that then you have to try and factor in and make provision for electric cooking. And actually then you've kind of missed the boat. You've got the expensive retrofitting to take place. The awareness raising hasn't happened in parallel. So yes, it's good to have a stronger grid, but also where there are electrification projects, we're saying you're then providing the supply of electricity. What we're aiming to do is then stimulate the demand for that supply. And that means being ready with electricity, and as you hit the nail on the head, with efficient electric cooking appliances. And as we've seen in places like South Africa, where there aren't efficient appliances, that's where you get the load shedding, and it just adds an inefficient load onto the grid. So yes, it's a viable concern, but it's actually cheaper in many cases, and especially in countries where you have got good electricity being generated. If you've got dense foods in particular, then we've shown from the MEX research that actually it's cheaper to cook with electricity, especially for those dense foods. But happy to put a few links in, especially around electric pressure cookers and why they're a viable option. And we've also now got an e-cookbook for Nigeria too. So I'll put that into the chat. It's 70 pages in length, so you get good value for money, given that it's a free resource. I'll drop that into the chat too.
Thank you, Alicia. Michelle, did you want to get in?
Yeah, just a quick reaction and actually underline a little bit what Alicia already mentioned. I think Nigeria is one of the biggest challenge of clean cooking we have. It's the biggest in Africa, and if you look around the world, it's one of the biggest as well. And looking about the potential solutions, probably you'll be a big mix of the different solutions of clean cooking, and they will be meeting different characteristics or different markets, right? Of course, one of the key elements is the quality of the electricity. But when you do an operation to improve quality of electricity or to develop new access to electricity, there is the moment to think if it makes sense or not to include e-cooking as a load. Because after that, this process is done, it could be much more costly as afterthought. That was a little bit what Alicia just mentioned. So it is a huge challenge, and we recognize it. The target of Nigeria for clean cooking on the compact, it's amazing, huge, and it's a big opportunity to all the technology to contribute, and for the different, and something you mentioned, and one of the experience I have is that often people look on average affordability or average consumers. And when you think, especially in countries that are big and you have a big heterogeneity of regions and different groups, it's very important to check not the average, but the different groups. So probably you have groups that have a higher capacity of affordability, groups that have lower affordability. So usually you may have some groups that can afford but does not have the financial capacity, or just don't have the access to the market. So I think thinking on that structure, that's where it's important to have a very clear strategy with the different target groups and the infrastructure inside of the country to target the roadmap. So my intuition on what I have been in Nigeria last month, especially discussing this kind of thing, it's that probably on Nigeria you need to have a big mix of solution, and e-cooking will be part of it. And the rural electrification agents can play an important role on bring this in their knowledge and in their plans. So, but you not cover everything. That's for sure. I don't think in any country, but in Nigeria especially, you have a technology that will be able to cover everything. But just to finalize, I think the challenge you underlined is very important. Quality of electricity, it's a very big challenge, but it's also opportunity, because every time that we improve quality, that's the moment where we need to think about the load and the use on the best of it.
Thank you, Michelle. And maybe one last question from participants. So we have a question in the chat from Bagat from Bhutan. So I'll read the question. So does the sectoral guidance on e-cooking include highland nomads, a minority group who move from place to place with their yaks and rely mainly on fuel wood as their source of energy? So does any speaker want to address the specific situation of nomad communities?
I'll defer to Alicia or Michelle if you all have anything that you would like to say there. I think if you've had a chance to take a look at the socioeconomic equity section of the guidance, I think that would be the most applicable for what you're referencing in terms of specifically addressing highly mobile communities. I would say that the guidance does not address that directly. However, I hope that some of the considerations that you'll see in the socioeconomic equity aspect of it might be useful for dealing with an indigenous group and some of the ways in which those groups can be foregrounded. But again, Alicia or Michelle, if you all have any thoughts on just from your own experience as practitioners in such diverse contexts that you would want to weigh in on, please do so.
We actually don't. Oh, sorry, Michelle, I jumped in. So we haven't looked at that as part of the MEX research, but I know a group of researchers who would probably be fascinated if I mention this, which I will do at our next meeting. we've looked at different informal types of settlements, and those range. It comes under the whole banner of last mile communities, and that can be any type of group, but specifically nomadic we haven't, but I will certainly mention that. Thank you.
Yeah, I don't have a good answer on that neither. I think it's a good question, but one thing just I want to mention is that e-cooking is not the best solution for all the case. So when you think, we can think where is the best case, and for me, my initial intuition on thinking about the problem is that if you need to move, we need to take into account the size of the appliance and the size of infrastructure that you need to use to move. So that would be the initial intuition. So I think e-cooking is an important solution, and you need to go, and it's easy to scale up, but we need to also be very aware that it's not the only solution for clean cooking, and in some cases not the best solution for clean cooking.
So Mohammed, I think that you had your hand up for a while. I don't know if you want to jump in with another question. Yes, please go ahead and open your mic.
Thank you very much. I'm Mohammed calling from Accra here. Yes, thank you for the opportunity to learn from these experiences. For Ghana, I have seen that we have a greater opportunity for e-cooking with our high electricity coverage. MEX is in Ghana. They have launched the e-book, and we are currently having new initiative promoting e-cooking in the country. At the initial stages when we're developing the NDC, the nationally determined contribution, we have focused on biomass stove, and then with LPG as well. But LPG infrastructure is limited to some parts of the country, not at least to the rural areas. But so I would wish that there is a global framework that can encourage countries like Ghana to have some policy measures, either through the NDC review or another opportunity to have government to provide incentives for e-cooking to take off. As it is now, it's left with the companies that are promoting these technologies using purely market model. I haven't seen any deliberate policy or support from the government to get these technologies adopted across the country because of to take advantage of our high electricity coverage. With the e-book, you clearly see that it's cheaper to even cook with electricity than the LPG that the government is promoting and other technologies. So we actually need to not to leave this promotion to the market as in these initial stages, but we can have government to provide some facilitation for at the point of the off-taker, the payment model from the end user that would make it comfortable for families to pay flexibly as against paying outright cash, which is difficult for most poor households or families, middle and low income families to bear at that level. The incentives provided for LPG, if there is any, through the national programs that the government has, free LPG stove distribution and cylinder over the years. If we can extend similar support to e-cooking, I think that would even be making greater impact. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mohammed. Do any speaker want to address that common question? Yes, Elisa.
Oh, well, Alicia probably has a little bit more to say, but I would just encourage Mohammed for us to get in contact together after this call, and I'll be I can email you from the registration list, or if you don't hear from me, email the secretariat, but I'll put my email in the chat as well. But I think we can just follow up afterwards and see what could be possible. Ghana is a very strong country in the CCAC and has co-led the CCAC for many years, and we have a lot of work underway in Ghana, and so maybe we can make some connections.
Alicia?
Similar to Sandra, really, just to say thank you for those comments, because it's really welcome to hear, and it's a really nice note to sort of draw to the conclusion of the webinar. So thank you very much for that, and really would appreciate connecting with you directly as well. Thank you.
Right, thank you everyone for this very engaging Q&A session. In the interest of time, I will conclude this webinar now with just very quickly 2 information that I wanted to share. The first one is to remind you that the AQMx webinar series will continue throughout the month of January, so you can meet us every Thursday of the month. Next week, we'll discuss the sectoral guidance on fuel quality improvement. On January 22nd, we'll meet to discuss the guidance on the elimination of open waste burning. And finally, on January 29, we'll have the webinar on alternatives to crop residue burning. And the last information I wanted to share is that we really encourage all interested participants to join the AQMx focus group, where you'll be able to actively contribute to the development of new content and new functionalities for the platform. So the QR code that you see on the screen will lead you to a short registration form. And yes, we'd love to hear from you. With that, thank you again, everyone. Thank you to all participants. Thank you to our great speakers for a very engaging discussion. And I wish you all a very good rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Juliette.